In 18 months, can President Ibrahim Traore turn 5% paid in at BCID into at least one cross-border solar plus transmission link? Proof must be public. Ignatures, a power purchase agreement, entract, demolished date, sunrise Dinnick. Electrification along the Sahel rises by 20%. If they do not, the promise fails. We will count the receipts. Now picture Dori at 2 in the morning. Aisatu, a midwife, keeps a kerosene lamp on a shelf because the grid coughs and the generator sputters. The incubator hums beside a newborn who cannot wait for daylight. Her hands move by muscle memory. This is what darkness feels like when power is a rumor and minutes are not negotiable. This is the wager of leadership, the biggest gamble of Ibrahim Traore's career. Not another rally, not another slogan, but a corridor that moves electricity across a border and holds at midnight. Here, Ibrahim Traore Projects treats African sovereignty as measurable and Pan-Africanism as cooperation at the level of contracts, interconnectors, and clinics. The public money and the public documents, month by month, until the numbers speak. Like to push this audit into more feeds. Subscribe for the monthly Scoreboard. Combating power, water, or rail, and add your city to map the diaspora. Share with one person who can help draft a power purchase agreement or a procurement plan. Step back from the lamp and look at the system that must carry the light. After leaving the regional bloc, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. The AES is not a new label on a map, it is a refusal to outsource strategy and a promise to build an operating system where budgets, not speeches, set the direction. 3 states agreed on a simple creed that speaks to Pan-Africanism in practice. Synchronized is a workflow, not a word. Inside that architecture sits the BCID. It is an investment and development bank. It is not a central bank. It is not a new currency. Foreground, the payment rail is still the CFA franc, and the gatekeeper of that rail is the BCEAO. BCAO, the CFA franc is pegged to the euro, and BCO windows still clear salaries, invoices, tenders, and debt service. That keeps transfers stable, but it also imposes cutoff times, paper-heavy reconciliations, and foreign exchange rules that can slow a project by days. Until the pipe changes, independence means mastering the pipe you ride. It means designing disbursements that do not choke the flow, closing ledgers on schedule, and passing compliance checks without drama. Technically, the energy piece must plug into something larger than a national grid. Interoperability with the West African Power Pool, the WAP, is non-negotiable. Grid codes, protection settings, and settlement metering must match before a single electron crosses a border. Prisnachny affetics in practice, not abstraction. And Pan-Africanism measured in interconnectors rather than applause. There are visible obstacles. ECOWAS sanctions add friction to every transfer. Low ratings lift borrowing spreads. Insurers price risk loudly. And contractors add a security tax that is not a headline but a bill. A substation, reopened for a convoy. Access roads and idle hours at a checkpoint. Each item lives on an invoice and pushes the budget. There are also potential allies, each with a function. Ment Bank and the West African Development Bank bring regional underwriting and know-how. Capital aligned with BRICS Africa and sovereign wealth funds brings risk appetite and longer tenor. Yuang the diaspora brings drafts that turn into contracts faster than press releases do. But every partner will watch the same metrics first. Domestic paid-in capital, a rulebook that survives a bad week. This monetary architecture was designed far from the Sahel. Mastering it from within is how a new chapter begins, so the question remains. Prove African sovereignty while still running through the BCEAO pipe. To find out, we need the blueprint and the 3 signatures that turn policy into power. Follow the money and watch the workflow that turns policy into power. A project like this begins with a capital call from BCID. Treasuries receive the notice, transfer funds, and request confirmation from the regional clearinghouse. The BCID confirms receipt on the payment rail of the CFA franc, and the bank books the equity into its ledgers. Only then does 5% move from a promise to an account that can co-finance a real line. Is the first moment when a speech becomes a number you can audit. Structure comes next because money needs a legal seat. For the cross-border corridor, BCID can form a special-purpose vehicle for transmission, or it can co-finance with the national transmission companies on both sides of the border. On the generation side, the plant can be built by an independent power producer with a concession, or by a public producer if the state wants to own and operate. The choice of structure decides who carries which risks and who gets paid when the meter turns. Then come the three anchor signatures that make the electrical and commercial logic real. Foreground, a power purchase agreement that commits an off-taker to buy the megawatt hours at a defined tariff with clear settlement rules. Second, a transmission service agreement or wheeling agreement that pays for the use of the line and assigns losses, outages, and curtailment. Forgiveness, an interconnection agreement under the WAP grid code that sets protection, control, and metering at the border node. Without these three signatures, energy cannot cross a border or be settled without dispute. With them, power can move and accounts can close. Procurement follows a published rulebook so that bidders know the road before they enter it. The bank posts the evaluation method before any bid opens. Unthinkable give weight to three things above the rest. Alities that deliver shared benefits. Speak A to first disbursement so the project does not stall in paperwork. Local content that can be audited, not just promised. Professiard, the EPC contract is signed and uploaded. That disbursement schedule ties payments to measurable milestones like foundation poured, structures erected, conductors strung, and substation energized, with escrow language that protects both the public and the builder. Operations are specified up front so the price is honest. Utility-scale solar arrays feed a battery energy storage system where the grid is weak. The line runs at 225 or 330 kilovolts with fiber optic OP-GAL-GW for control and protection. Substations are built with digital relays and a SCADA system, so operators can see and act in real time. Phaser measurement units, often called PMUs, work like a GPS for the grid, showing angle and timing so a controller can keep the system steady when the wind shifts or a line trips. Commercial operation begins only at the energization date after acceptance tests pass under load and under contingency. All this technology, all this complexity, serves one human purpose: to make sure the lights do not go out in Dori again, to keep a vaccine refrigerator cold through the night, with steady hands instead of a kerosene lamp. If the system cannot protect that promise, then the acronyms do not matter. Governance and transparency do not arrive after a ribbon cutting. They arrive first, and they return every quarter. BCID publishes capital calls and disbursements with reconciliations. Grid operators post SCID and SAFE for the project zone so citizens can see reliability in hours, not headlines. Tidro Ministries post clinic electrification data along the corridor so progress is not a rumor. A public data room holds the charter, the board roster, procurement results, the EPC contract, and updates to the disbursement schedule so any viewer can follow the money without guessing. Who has to sign first? And if a signature slips, do we count the delay in weeks, or do we count it in excuses? Because structure and signatures are only as strong as the cash behind them. To test that, we now follow the next thread: Benga money itself. Follow the structure and the signatures to their source. None of it matters without cash. Platinum in capital is money wired and booked. Call is a promise with conditions. Confina one buys steel and pays crews. Emerald reassures on paper. The Lightning BCID, and for disciplined lenders, the order is simple. Call second. For BCID, the foundation is the 5% paid in capital from the member states. To show scale, without pretending to final numbers, consider three illustrative scenarios. If Burkina Faso's tax intake in the last pre-launch budget were about 2 trillion CFA francs, 5% would be near 100 billion, which implies roughly 25 billion per quarter if salaries and essential services do not crowd it out. Around 1.5 trillion, 5% would be about 75 billion. Quarterly flows there are sensitive to defense outlays, so surges in security spending thin the stream, unless offset elsewhere. Promisloaf stood near 1.2 trillion, 5% would be around 60 billion. Receipts there rise and fall with commodity cycles and border trade, so a slowdown at a frontier dents a quarter. Submerge the sketches are only to make timing and scale visible. The ledger will speak when transfers land, the BCEAO confirms receipt, and BCID books the equity. Cash flow is one side, leverage is the other. Picture a leverage tower that climbs only as far as its base is strong. The base is domestic equity from the 5% line, ring-fenced inside BCID so it cannot be raided by a hard week. When the base is solid, Tier 2 steps in. The African Development Bank and the West African Development Bank bring regional underwriting, environmental and social safeguards, and tenor that matches a construction curve. They anchor co-financing once governance signals are clear. Tier 3 is capital aligned with BRICS Africa, sovereign wealth funds, and global infrastructure pools. They come when risk allocation makes sense, when the PPA creates revenue certainty, when convertibility and transfer assurances are in place, and when a partial risk guarantee covers political and payment risk that no contractor can carry alone. At the apex sits the flexible layer. Diaspora bonds that give citizens and friends a stake. Escrow accounts run by neutral agents that release funds only when milestones are certified. Windshield wrappers for political and security risk, so a project can keep moving through a rough season. Simulate the apex is not the start. It is the capstone that makes the stack resilient. This sequence is not theory. Green on the base invites the next tier. Yellow breeds hesitation. Red freezes the stack. In practice, that means one thing. The sooner the domestic foundation reaches 90% of the period target, the sooner AFDB and BOAD can place the item on their board calendars, and the sooner BRICS-aligned pools stop watching and start term sheeting. Governance and transparency keep the tower plumb. 4 minimum disclosures belong on a public page from day one and must refresh each quarter. Position, the charter, and the full board roster with duties and terms in plain language. Second, the procurement scoring rulebook so bidders know how cross-border externalities, speed to first disbursement, and local content are weighted. Call and disbursement report that reconciles notices, receipts, contractors, milestones, and amounts in one view. Data room index with file names, refresh dates, and a contract-level ledger so journalists, researchers, and citizens can audit without begging for PDFs. Governance and transparency are not decoration. They are how the leverage tower stays upright when wind hits. Return to the calendar. Quarter by quarter, the treasuries hit send. The BCEAO confirms on the CFA franc rail and BCID updates its equity line. Each confirmation is a brick in the base. When the base looks strong, borrowing costs fall, timelines hold, and partners move. When it weakens, spreads widen, schedules fray, and even friendly money waits on the sidelines. So here is the plain question that decides how fast policy becomes pylons. When will the foundation hit 90% so that co-financing steps in? Tell us the month you expect that line to clear, and we will set the scoreboard to that date. Money is the blood, but technology is the body. To see how this project actually breathes, we now peel back the hardware that makes the promise work. Money is the blood, but technology is the body. Here is how this project breathes, piece by piece, so a corridor can carry power across a border and keep a clinic alive at 2 in the morning. Start with generation. The solar field is utility scale and built for desert light. Bifacial modules take sunlight from above and from the sand below. Single-axis trackers turn through the day like a slow wrist, keeping panels at a better angle without the cost of a full 2-axis system. Inverters give the plant a modular spine. If one chain fails, the others keep working, so a fault does not silence the whole array. A battery energy storage system, a BESS, sits behind the plant to smooth ramps hold frequency when demand jumps, and store afternoon surplus for the early evening peak. Follow the electrons to the transmission line. The corridor runs at 225 or 330 kilovolts, the common levels for a regional solar interconnector. D-wire, often called OPGW, stitches the route together for protection and control, so operators can speak to the line and hear it answer. Commonwealth. At the substations, dynamic voltage support is not optional. ITBART, a static synchronous compensator, a STAT-COM, or a static VAR compensator, an SVC, keeps the grid inside a safe band when heat, wind, or a sudden load change pushes it off-center. Breakers and relays are mapped so the system can isolate a fault without taking down an entire district. Control is the nervous system. SCADA gives operators eyes and hands in real time. Phaser measurement units, PMUs, act like a GPS for the grid, showing angle and timing at key nodes so a dispatcher can hold the corridor steady during a disturbance. The West African Power Pool, WAPP, provides the rulebook for behavior at the border. Interconnection studies prove that the new link will hold under stress, that protection trips when and where it should, and that settlements can be measured without argument. Class 0.2 S meters sit at the commercial nodes, so every kilowatt hour is counted the same way on both sides. That is how a cross-border invoice becomes a number both treasuries can accept. Security and telecommunications ride the same path as the power. Air runs the length of the line with drop points at stations for voice, data, and cameras. Sensors watch vulnerable spans, towers, and yards, and alarms follow a clear chain, so a contractor is not left waiting for permission while a spare part sits on a shelf. Access control and lighting at yards are basic, but they matter. A short delay at a gate can cascade into lost hours for a convoy later in the day. These are not glamorous costs, but they are the work of making a transmission line real in a rough neighborhood. At the edge, where people live, the hardware is practical. A step-down transformer takes 33 or 11 kilovolts to low voltage. An automatic transfer switch, an ATS, selects the best source without a human in the loop, so an outage does not erase the gains of a long night. Kingdom's, a Mickle-grade, uninterruptible supply protects incubators, suction, and monitors. It, a small rooftop solar set with a battery, keeps essential loads alive through the hour when a feeder blinks. Foreground refrigerators use World Health Organization-grade equipment with data loggers, so cold chain uptime is not a rumor, but a number. All of this is technology in service of a moral math. A plant and a line and a substation are not abstractions. They are a chain that reaches a midwife in Dori. The point is not to stack acronyms on a slide. The point is to keep light steady over a table where a new life waits. So here is the test in plain words. Can one BESS block catch a grid dip in the first 5 seconds? To save a vaccine refrigerator. Can a STATSM steady voltage when a hot wind pushes the line? Can SCADA and PMAs give a dispatcher the seconds needed to keep the corridor standing? And the answer is yes. Then the clinic stays bright and the corridor earns its name. If the answer is no, technology has not done its job. All this technology, all this equipment, it adds up. In the next chapter, we turn back to the bill and ask what this machine costs, how we pay for it, quarter by quarter, and which numbers belong on the scoreboard so the public can tell whether promises are becoming pylons. All this technology, all this equipment, it adds up. So let us open the public bill and speak in ranges that a citizen can hold to account later when the receipts appear. These are illustrative packs for planning and debate. Wilmington and the Power Purchase Agreement, the EPC, and the disbursement schedule go live. We will replace estimates with the numbers written in ink. Start with the starter pack. Think of a 50-megawatt solar field supported by a battery of 20 megawatts and 40 megawatt hours. Add a 150-kilometer line at 225 kilovolts and a single substation. Submerged all-in cost sits in a band from $160 million to $230 million. What fills that band? Plungules and trackers. Dori energy storage system. The steel and concrete for towers and foundations. Conductor, insulators, and an optical ground wire that carries both protection and data. A control and protection suite in the yard. Neste's engineering, construction management, and commissioning. Commonwealth liaison and land, a line in the budget that must be real. ICRIT insurance and the security tax to guard, escort, and build temporary access where a map shows only a track. A contingency for delay and weather. None of this is exotic. It is the price of getting a first corridor up fast.
Now the regional pack.
Double the plant to 100 megawatts and lift the battery to 50 megawatts and 200 megawatt hours. Stretch the corridor to 300 kilometers and build 2 substations to anchor the span. GLOM range rises to a band between $360 million and $540 million. Why does the band widen? The cost drivers start to lean harder on the total. USB and copper prices shift with global cycles. Cement and aggregates depend on haul distance and axle limits. Mistaken of way crosses soil and rock that demand different foundations. Spans lengthen over floodplains. Demolished plan grows more complex as the route touches more districts. Pushes, and the band moves with it. Finally, the backbone pack. 200 megawatts of solar paired with a battery of 100 megawatts and 400 megawatt hours. 500 kilometers of line with 3 or 4 substations to feed a region rather than a single district. Farutka. The all-in band runs from $700 million to $900 million. Timelines, logistics, and schedule risk do as much work on the number as the equipment itself. More crews on more fronts mean more mobilizations, more convoys, and more idle hours if a gate or a bridge is not ready when a truck arrives. The tower count grows, and with it the chances that a single missing component stalls a section of the work. Across all 3 packs, a small set of cost drivers dominates. Steel, copper, and cement move with world markets and with the depth of local supply. Terrain sets how many foundations need deep work. Redeemed sets the size of access and laydown areas. The security tax is quiet but real, paid through guards, escorts, and insurance, rather than through speeches. Unresolved adjustment clauses for fuel and steel should be standard so that a global spike does not force a renegotiation every season. This is the contract language that prevents finger-pointing when the world moves. So is the way we pay. Foreign exchange risk can erase a margin when turbines and conductors are priced in dollars or euros, while local labor and services are paid in CFA francs. A narrow FX risk policy helps. Local currency tranches for domestic inputs. Insistence forward cover where it exists and is affordable. ZOP clauses that use a transparent reference rate and a clear day for conversion, so a contractor is not trapped between 2 numbers. These packs are not only about totals. They are about when money moves. A clean disbursement schedule ties cash to measurable work. Undecided and fenced. Jebbered. Structures stood. Conductors strung. A compensation assembled and tested. Corridor energized. Each step should release a percentage held in escrow by a neutral agent, so both the public and the builder are protected. The plan must also show what is paid in local currency and what is paid in hard currency, so FX risk is visible rather than hidden in a margin. What does the starter pack buy in daily life? Here is one way to think about it. If we can raise electrification to a service level that keeps 100 clinics along the corridor on steady power through the night, how much diesel does that save? Tongol cell sites a clinic burns 8 to 12 liters a day to keep a generator ready for lights, refrigeration, and a handful of machines. That suggests a band from 800 to 1,200 liters saved each day across 100 clinics when the grid holds. The exact number will vary by site, by season, and by practice. But the order of magnitude is clear enough to put on a scoreboard next to paid-in capital and next to construction milestones. These bands are not the last word. They are the opening frame for honest negotiation. They tell us when a bid is plausible and when a claim should be challenged. They give a finance ministry and a planning unit a table to start from, and they give citizens a way to sense-check a headline before they believe it. Most of all, they let us hold the project to account on a calendar. Quarter, what moved from the band into a signed contract, and from a contract into a certified work on the ground. So here is the question that takes this chapter back to the people who live along the line. For the starter pack, how many liters of diesel would 100 clinics save each day if the grid held steady through the night? If you work in a clinic, if you supply generators, if you keep the cold chain, tell us the number you see on the ground. We will add your figure to the scoreboard and test it against the next quarter of receipts. We have opened the bill. Now we turn to the risks. Discharged of this scale carries threats on and off the balance sheet. Politics. Berg, internal competition for the first slice. And the quiet security tax that rides every invoice. In the next chapter, we lay out the shock absorbers, ring-fenced cash, independent audits, tender boards, and escrow. 6.3, the tools that keep the schedule alive when the week goes bad. We have opened the bill. Now we turn to the risks and the shock absorbers that keep a schedule alive when the week goes bad. In plain words, this is where governance stops being a slogan and becomes a toolkit. We are not here to fear a hard week. We are here to design for it. Start with politics. Cabinets reshuffle. Priorities flip. A signature that felt firm on Friday can look provisional by Monday. Mears fence paid in capital by law, not by promise. Funds that have moved from treasuries into BCID should sit in segregated accounts, outside day-to-day budget cycles, with rules that survive a ministerial change. Foreground clauses keep contracts valid across political weather. Step-in rights let the bank or a senior lender replace a non-performing contractor without restarting the entire procurement clock. When these tools are written into agreements on day one, a project does not live at the mercy of every rumor. Next comes competition inside the house. Each country is poor, each corridor has a case, and the fight for the first slice can paralyze a board. CURE is a transparent allocation formula announced before the list is drawn. 1/3 equal share to keep the alliance stable. Wilmington by population to reflect people served. Chart third by cross-border externalities. To reward projects that lower costs and raise reliability on both sides of a line. Publish the long list, the short list, and the scores. Racked minutes that show how evaluation translated into a decision. Stabilize is what turns suspicion into a rule that even the state that waits its turn can respect. Security and logistics are not comments. They are invoices. Insurers price risk into premia. Contractors add guards and escorts. 10-4 temporary access roads and modular bridges have to appear before the first truck can deliver a transformer. Minimized yards must be safe and lit, or a delivery window is wasted. Will not hide in overhead. They belong as explicit lines in the bill of quantities and in the payment plan. When the cost is named, it can be managed. Now set the shock absorbers that sit between a plan and a bad week. Crow into each milestone so cash releases only when a certified chunk of work is complete. Photo'd go. The agent should be neutral, and the triggers should be photographic, metered, and signed by an engineer with a license to protect. Create an independent procurement board, sometimes called an independent tender board, that is insulated from ministerial pressure, publishes conflict of interest declarations, and discloses scores when it awards. Require a quarterly audit by an external firm, plus a plain language summary that any citizen can read in under 5 minutes. Pharmaceutical variance report each month that shows plan versus actual. For capital calls and disbursements, so drift is visible early, not hidden until year-end. Dispute resolution should be more than a paragraph at the back of a contract. Point to a neutral forum with a short timetable and a clear ladder for relief. Kaiser with an engineer's determination on facts. Move to expert adjudication in weeks, not years, and hold arbitration as the backstop. Build in interim measures so machines keep moving while lawyers argue. A fair process does not slow projects when it runs on a clock. It protects them from gridlock. The same logic applies to community and land. A project that bulldozes trust will stall even if the math is perfect. Put consultation minutes in local languages on a public page. Lawful parcels for the right-of-way before procurement closes. Position a resettlement plan where relocation cannot be avoided. Confiscated compensation schedules and receipts. Keep a grievance log with response times that are measured, not promised. The human indicator we set earlier is not decoration. It is the early warning system that tells you whether a line will be defended by the community when trouble knocks. Risk management also means making cash resilient to shocks that are not political. Price adjustment clauses should cover fuel and steel so a global spike does not force a renegotiation every season. An FX policy should declare which tranches are paid in local currency and which in hard currency, how the reference rate is chosen, and on which day conversion happens. That is how a contractor avoids the trap of two numbers and one invoice. Insurance should be deliberate. Ambiguous risk cover for convertibility and transfer. Security extensions for work in high-risk zones. Bullied cannot carry tail risks meant for a sovereign or a multilateral. When coverage is clear, the bid becomes honest and comparable. With these shock absorbers in place, a delay does not become a crisis. A convoy that waits will still cost money, but an escrow linked to measurable milestones keeps the cadence of disbursement intact. Springfield, who leaves office, will still make headlines, but a ring-fenced account and continuity clauses keep the ledger steady. A dispute will still flare, but a short, neutral path to determination keeps machines moving and pushes arguments into a room built for them. The scoreboard we promised is built to detect whether these defenses exist in practice. Do we see an independent procurement board listed with names and terms? Twig quarterly audit letters post on time? Are escrow agents named in contracts? And are release triggers written in human words? Are variance reports public each month? Or do they appear only when a donor asks? The answers are not abstract. They show up, or they do not. So here is the grounded question for people who work this corridor. If a convoy waits 12 hours for an escort, how far does the timeline slip? Does an escrow tied to measurable milestones help keep the cadence of disbursement? Or does cash freeze until a quarterly meeting? On the ground, and we will test the risk measures against your receipts in the next update. All these risks and all these tools must show up somewhere. And that takes us to the public scoreboard. All these risks and all these tools must be visible in one place. That place is the public scoreboard, with green, yellow, and red. Imized, it is how governance and transparency stop being abstractions and become a page the public can read in 5 minutes. 4 lines sit at the center of this scoreboard. The first line is paid in against the 5% commitment. Green means the member states have credited at least 90% of the target for the period into BCID accounts, with BCEAO confirmations and ledger entries to match. Yellow means 50% to under 90%, a signal that momentum exists, but confidence wobbles. 7th means below 50%, a warning that the leverage tower cannot climb. Each month we show the target, the actual, the variance, and the receipts that prove the numbers. A capital call notice. Treasury transfer. A BCEAO confirmation. A bank reconciliation. If one is missing, we mark it as missing. The second line is project reality. We count only cross-border projects that have all 3 documents on the table. Resolution that approves scope and budget. A published procurement plan with packages, timelines, and a clear evaluation method. Sanford, a dated disbursement schedule that ties cash to measurable milestones. Proximity means 3 or more. Yellow means 1 or 2. Red K means none. A project that lacks any of those 3 is not ready. It is an intention on paper. Tighten the corridor name, the countries it connects, the expected impact, and links to each document. Brighter timestamp every update, so viewers can see progress in weeks, not in adjectives. The third line is transparency itself. Green means the charter, the full board roster with duties and terms, the procurement rulebook, the quarterly capital call report, the quarterly disbursement report, and the data room index are all posted on time and in full. The means partial disclosure or late publication means silence. Pedestrian's room matters because it is the table of contents for accountability. It shows file names, refresh dates, and where to find the contract level ledger. If a link breaks, we record the failure and the time it was down. If a file changes, we log the version number so no one can claim confusion. The fourth line is the human KPI. It tracks community consultation and land transparency for each approved project. Green means consultation meetings held with minutes in local languages, parcel maps for the right-of-way, a public resettlement action plan when relocation is unavoidable, compensation schedules that are paid on time with receipts, open grievance channels with response times that are met, and an independent monitoring note on a fixed calendar. Kaumbuk Li means partial coverage or late disclosures that force communities to guess. Chungs means no consultation, no maps, opaque land transfers, or evidence of coercion, money that flows regress. Or it is a future dispute. The scoreboard is not a press release. It is a rhythm. Every month we publish a 5-minute update that shows each line in green, yellow, or red. We pin the links in the description and in a top comment. Windshield every episode and keep a ledger of changes across quarters so trends are visible. If a number improves, we explain why. If it falls, we show the friction that caused the drop. If data goes missing, we say that too. The point is to make accountability a habit, not an event. We will also add a short receipts reel to each update. It is a carousel of the most important documents that landed that month. Plagued power purchase agreement. An uploaded EPC contract. Blackmail. Disbursement schedule. Procurement result with scores. A data room refresh log. Genshot, share, and challenge. If a ministry corrects a number, we post the correction with the date and replace the figure in the next episode. To keep the page honest, we will crowdsource the links under 2 tags. Hashtag BCID for capital and projects, and hashtag Kim Tuan Chukwen for broader governance and transparency. A link, add a line on what changed. A new schedule, a new map, terminated minute from a village meeting. Zimbabwe, we will fold your receipts into the scoreboard and credit the finder by name if you wish. So here is the question we ask the audience every month. Which line do you want as the headline on the scoreboard? The paid-in line that proves 5% is real, object reality count that proves construction is coming, the transparency grade that proves governance is mature, or the human KPI that proves consent and compensation are real. IMF, tell us now, and the next update will lead with your choice. With this scoreboard in place, we are ready to begin. Problems at the end of this month. Parliamentary. 5 minutes. 4 lines. Receipts on screen. With the scoreboard set, we turn to the number that touches a life in the dark. Question electrification along the corridor within 18 months. Not as a photo of a wire on a wall, but as a service level a nurse can rely on at 2 in the morning. Rising stops being a headline and becomes a chart that a district health director can read. Define clinic electrification in plain terms. Power holds through the night without a scramble for a generator key. Lights and essential sockets stay alive during deliveries and emergencies. Refrigerator for vaccines is not fragile, it is steady. Eye devices that matter and are, a suction pump, a monitor. Do not blink when a feeder dips. African independence becomes something a midwife can use. Now set the metrics so the target is measurable. First, vaccine cold chain uptime, recorded in hours per month in the safe band. UKI's World Health Organization grade unit comes with a data logger. We read it. The baseline might show long gaps where ice packs stood in for power. The target is a clean lift, with cold chain uptime climbing and staying high during the hottest weeks. Second, diesel saved per site per day. If a clinic runs 8 to 12 liters each day to keep a generator ready for light and refrigeration, we want that number to fall as the feeder holds. Progressively log of fuel purchases and generator runtime tells the truth. Third, night berths. Under adequate light. Delivery registers already record time and conditions. We add a simple tick for powered light available. The aim is not to shame a clinic. It is to see whether light shows up where risk is highest. Fourth, reliability at the connection point, measured by BCID and SAFE. Outage hours and outage events should drop in the project zone. Somewhere a utility can post and a citizen can understand. Fifth, voltage and frequency within a safe band during sensitive procedures. A cheap meter and a standard log can tell a story. We aim for a lower share of episodes where voltage sags or frequency swings during a blood draw, a transfusion, or a premature delivery. These are not exotic measurements. The health ministry has registers. Utilities have feeder logs. Vaccine refrigerators have data loggers. Generators have hour meters. We do not invent new paperwork. We read what already exists and ask for 3 small additions where needed. A tick for powered light at delivery. A simple voltage and frequency log for sensitive procedures. A weekly fuel and runtime note. To show whether the corridor is keeping its promise. Now return to a face and a room. Aisatu in Dori no longer reaches for a kerosene lamp tucked on a shelf. The vaccine refrigerator hums like a slow drum through the night, and the morning nurse does not find thawed ice packs sitting in a basin. A preterm infant lies in a warmed cot and does not shiver. The suction pump does not cough and stall, whisper a prayer for the generator to catch. The line held, and the clinic felt the difference. We will present this clinic track on the same public scoreboard as money and projects. Each month, one line shows the share of facilities along the corridor that meet the service level we define. Beside it, a small panel tracks 4 anchors. Regazine cold chain uptime in hours per month. Diesel saved in liters per day. Night deliveries under powered light as a share of total deliveries. Mockability at the feeder in outage hours and events. When the line moves, we say by how much and show which district drove the change. When it stalls, we ask, why? Clinic, for a busy clinic. Is it a feeder that trips at dawn? Is it a voltage sag when a pump starts up in the market next door? The rule for data is simple. Keep it local and keep it comparable. Unresolved not need a perfect census to see a real shift. Crimson panel of 100 clinics spaced along the corridor is enough to tell whether the trend is honest. Frudga public the list of sites, protect the privacy of patients, and let each district see itself on a map. If a clinic wants to join the panel, we add it and note the date. If a clinic leaves because the building is under renovation, we flag it and pick it up when work ends. This is also how money meets meaning. When paid in capital turns into poles and wire, when a procurement plan becomes an energized span, the proof shows up in a data log and in a delivery room. Numbers will talk back to us. Triangular uptime rises and diesel falls. The corridor is doing its work. If outages cling to the same hours each week, we press the utility to clear a fault that niggles the same feeder at sunrise. During a critical hour, we ask whether a battery block or a voltage support device is missing at the substation. The language of sovereignty is not always a speech. It is often a sound. Sovereignty at midnight should sound like a compressor humming, and not like a generator sputtering. So here is the question we ask as the cameras leave and the night returns. What does sovereignty sound like where you live? The steady hum of a vaccine refrigerator, or the hollow cough of a motor gasping for fuel? We close the circle with a test that is simple and public. In 18 months, 3 signatures and 1 result must appear in the open. Uzbek purchase agreement. Unresolved, an EPC contract. An energization date. And along the corridor, clinic electrification must rise by 20%. That is how Ibrahim Traore's wager is measured. That is how sovereignty steps out of a speech and into a room, where a midwife works at 2 in the morning. We will not chase rumors. We will count receipts.
The months of 5-minute scoreboard shows 4 lines in green, yellow, or red. Paid in capital versus 5%. Project reality with a board resolution and a dated disbursement schedule. Governance and transparency with links that load. And a human indicator that tracks consultation, land, and clinic service levels. Links pinned. Forbidden-ins time-stamped. Corrections log.
At month 18, we deliver a verdict. Did a bank become a builder? Did a press conference turn into a ledger entry, a contract, and power at night? Can clinics meet the service standard 20% more often? Wildfire's Scoreboard will answer without shouting. Now add your hands. Comment which corridor should open first, power, water, or rail, and add your city to map the diaspora. Tell us which document to decode next, the capital call, the tender rulebook, the interconnection study, or the disbursement schedule. We Scoreboard finds you. Share this episode with one engineer, one doctor or nurse, and one logistics planner. Prism because power when each link in the chain moves.